when she comes. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 6th annual Border Book Bash. I'm Margarita Longoria. I'm really excited to have this panel today on exploring identity through words. I'm going to let everybody. I know it's 9:40, so we want to get started because it's going to be about 50 minutes. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves and tell us where they're tuning in from and a little bit about their books. We'll start with Elly.
Hi, friends. So happy Saturday. I am Elly Swartz. I am tuning in from Cape Cod, Massachusetts, otherwise known as my happy place. Also, the setting of my newest book, Dear Student, is set here. All of my books have mental health themes woven in. Dear Student is about a girl with social anxiety who becomes the secret voice of the middle school advice column. Because the mental health challenges we all face, they don't define us, right? There's a whole other part of our life. So the books have that woven in, but have other things. Finding Perfect is about a girl with undiagnosed OCD. There's a lot of slam poetry in the book. Give and Take is about a girl also who has OCD, who has anxiety and hoards. But that book is also about a family that takes in foster babies waiting adoption. And then Smart Cookie is about a girl who whose mom passed away years ago, and she puts a secret profile online to find her dad a wife. There's a ghost story and a lot of humor. So I think what links my books is that hopefully they have a lot of heart, and it's about kids who are not one thing, because we're all this unique blend. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Alessandra?
So that's my name, Alessandra Narvaez Varela. I go by the mouthful because in Mexico, Narvaez comes from my dad, Varela comes from my mom. And something interesting is that when I started university in El Paso and UTEP, I dropped the Varela for some reason, and I wanted to, I guess, subconsciously become American. It was really, really weird. It took me a while to reclaim my mama's last name. So I say hi and buen sábado, good Saturday, Elly said, from El Paso. But most of the times I like to say El Paso, Ciudad Juárez, because that's my native city, and where if I drive from my house right here to Ciudad Juárez, that's maybe 30 minutes. So I'm here in Ciudad Juárez, El Paso. My book is 30 Talks with Love, and this is my debut. So it's my first book. I also address mental health and mental illness because it's based on my own experience pretty much. The book is also about girlhood experiences, especially being a girl in Ciudad Juárez in 1999. And because of the time frame, there's also the very complex backdrop of the femicides, which are still going on. But that's a little bit about the book. And that's it. I'm very, very glad to be here in such wonderful company.
We're so happy to have you. Jonny?
Yeah. Hi, good morning. My name is Jonny Garza, and my debut novel is 1,500 Miles from the Sun. I like to say that it is basically Selena's Dreaming of You, but if you make it into a gay YA novel, I have to shout out Selena on a Saturday morning. It followed a Corpus Christi, Texas high school senior named Jules Luna, who's just trying to finish his senior year, have one final soccer season, spend all the time with his friends, and graduate and move to California and away from a very constrictive household that's kept him in the closet for 17 years. But that kind of just goes out the window when he accidentally comes out as gay on Twitter after having a little bit too much fun at a party. And so in the days and weeks and months that follow, Jules finds out all of the really great things about being able to live openly and starting to love yourself for who you are. But also he learns the trials and the hardships that can come from fully living and realizing yourself, including trying to figure out how to tell his dad that he's gay, especially when the one person in his life who really connects with him and he really loves is 1,500 miles away.
It's a beautiful story.
Thank you.
Eunice, Charlton, welcome.
Oh, I'm so sorry I'm late.
And the reason I was like, I started to record because it was saying on my thing that I didn't record, like within 10 minutes, it was going to delete everything. And I was like, no, I can't delete everything. So I gotta let her in when she comes.
No, the show must go on. So we're doing introductions.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm Charlton Trujillo. I'm an author and filmmaker, and the book that I'm most known for is the Fat Angie series. This is, I'll try to get the camera there. This is the one that came out in November. It is the third and final book, although people are saying, are you sure? I am absolutely sure. It is time for me to move on and have my own identity, minus Angie. But yeah, so this series is about a girl. Her name's Angie. She's fat. And, and this young woman who, through the series, has to come to terms, with a family of hardships and a sister who's missing in the Iraq War, and dealing with issues of grief and discovering that she's queer and what does that mean, and really and truly learning to step into her own power. So, I don't want to step through all three of the books because then I've given away all three of the plots. But in essence, when we get to the third book, it is loud, it is rock and roll, it is punk, it is
amazing.
And it's also really and truly about the heart of what it means to be a young woman and to find your truth. And what does that look like in many ways of being woman? And there's a band that's formed in this book, and each of those members represents a different way in which we can move through this world. And so, I am so massively in love with this third book. It's disgusting how happy I am with it. As a writer, we always want to go back, and I do anyway. I want to always edit parts of the book. I feel like, I should have done this sentence or that sentence. But I have to say, for the most part, I could not be more happier with seeing the growth arc of this beautiful, fantastic young woman named Angie. So, yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, I've been really excited because I've followed Angie from the beginning to the end, and it's been a great journey. So congratulations. It really has.
Thank you.
So I'm asking anybody if they want to ask questions. They're going to be on the side, and I'll adjust those if we have them. But the next question I wanted to ask was, each of your stories look at identity in different ways. How did your life and your culture influence your work? We can start with Elly.
Okay. I love this question. And I mean, for me, like my characters, I grapple with anxiety in a lot of different ways. And I think most of the people that, especially in the world we're living in now, anxiety is on the rise. Mental health issues and challenges are on the rise. I've been inspired by people in my life and the kids I've met in schools and coffee shops who, when I have conversations with them about mental health, and I say, well, why didn't you tell anybody? Why didn't you talk about it? Why didn't you share? And they say things like this: well, I was embarrassed, or I didn't want kids to think I'm weird, or I don't want them to stop being friends with me. I mean, for me, that's not okay. It's never okay, regardless, whatever part of your identity, it's who you are. It's your heart. To be ashamed of that is not okay. So for me, I was inspired I want kids to see themselves on the page. When I started writing Finding Perfect, it was 16 years ago. And the only book on the shelf was a YA book called Kissing Doorknobs, which was fabulous, but it was for older kids. I write middle grade. Anxiety and mental health issues start when kids are young. So what are those kids supposed to think when they don't see themselves on the page? That their life doesn't matter? That they should not talk about these things? I don't want them to feel like they need to be quiet about this or be ashamed. So the more we can normalize it in a book, the more kids can realize that they are not alone, the more we can give them the language, the actual tools to say what is happening, the more they can feel connected. So for me, I guess the anxiety I experienced and still experience and work with and navigate and have come to realize it doesn't define me. Mental health doesn't define these kids. It's a part. It's one thing in a mix of many amazing traits that make us all imperfectly beautiful. And I think that's what inspired me.
That was beautiful. Yes. And I, this particular book festival, the Border Book Bash, whenever we started it, I was real, because I always felt that, and book festivals are great for everybody, right? But growing up and going to different things, they were always geared towards the elementary kids and picture books. And picture books are my favorite book in the whole world. I love picture books. But I felt, because I was a junior high teacher, I was an 8th grade teacher, and I'm a high school librarian, I felt we didn't have enough celebration of books anymore for the junior high and the high school kid. They kind of just forget to read. They read so much in the elementary, and then they kind of don't read anymore. And I was like, no, we need to bring them back to books. So middle grade and YA books are pretty much everything that I love. So thank you. Okay, Jonny?
Yeah, and there's like thunder happening outside, so I apologize if it just sounds like something is like pounding against my wall. It's just thunder. But yeah, life and identity really is what I think drives me as a writer. I grew up in like a very small conservative white town in Southeast Texas, and so in that way I grew up very assimilated, and I wanted, especially as a queer person, but also as a brown person, I wanted to live a life that I thought was most comfortable with the people around me. And so it really wasn't until I moved to San Antonio for college and I was able to navigate through and see and experience Mexican culture, Tejana culture, Chicana culture in a way that wasn't so like existent upon other people's preferences of who I am. And I got to meet queer brown people and queer Black people and have those discussions and figure out who I am with them, that like I really felt whole. And I wanted this book specifically to be about who I am now, who I am in those 10 years since I moved here to San Antonio. I didn't want to write a story that hinged upon like what it is to exist in a white-centered world. I wanted it to be full of brown kids and Black kids, and I wanted there to be a celebration of who Jules was as a Mexican person. And I think drafting it was kind of difficult in that way because I had a lot of imposter syndrome about, am I Mexican enough to write this book? How queer is too queer? And am I queer enough to even write this book? And battling that and figuring out how to really draft that and figure out this story in a way that made me realize that like I can do this. I am Mexican enough. I mean, obviously, and I'm queer enough to write this book. And just like trying to figure that out. And I think though, like the one thing that I used foundationally though was food. Food is a big part of this book. It's a big part of my next book. It's just something that like, even in that small town, like there was that favorite Mexican restaurant that we had that, and my grandmother like cooked like just everything. And so like, that was something that I always identified with. And I was like, if I can just start with food, if I can start with tacos and enchiladas and arroz con leche and things like that, like I can then build on a comfortability of my identity. Just I'll start with something simple like that, something that I really enjoy and something that like I know very well, and work it up that way. But ever since then it's just been like I've slowly pushed the gas on my identities and putting in my book, but ever since then it's been kind of flooring it. My agent says that my second book is just 10 times even more queerer and Mexican, and I'm super excited about that. And that's what we're going to keep on doing. But yeah, as far as life and culture, I love putting both of those into my works and celebrating them and showing that like people like us, brown queer people, can exist.
Thank you. I understand. Like I know what you mean. If you're Mexican enough, I know. I grew up here on the border. Right. Like, and I would go to Mexico. I mean, we would go all the time. It wasn't like, but my Spanish isn't perfect. And I would always feel ashamed. I still feel ashamed that my Spanish isn't like up to par where it should be, like where my parents' Spanish or other, because my parents growing up were, they couldn't speak Spanish because they would get mad, they would get hit at school. So they didn't really teach us. But of course you pick it up living in the area and hearing it, and they would speak it. They would speak Spanish to us. And so we understood it, but like, and I can speak it, but sometimes I feel like I sound like I don't like the way I sound, and I feel embarrassed. So sometimes I shy away from it, and that always makes me sad because I feel like, am I really Mexican? Because I don't speak Spanish well enough. So that really hit my heart when you said that. So thank you. Okay, next we're going to go with Alessandra.
Thank you, Margarita. That resonates a lot with me. And for me, it was the opposite, but I'm still trying to figure out because I'm in the border, but I grew up in Ciudad Juarez. So I guess I was Mexican enough for a long time, whatever that means, because even when I traveled to, and I've only traveled once to the interior of the Republic, which is such a shame. I had to know more of Mexico. They thought that I was a foreigner because of the way that I spoke Spanish. And that's just a result of living here, teaching, having my accent being affected by my students. So it's really it's a weird existence, and double consciousness and not being ni de aquí ni de allá, right? And when writing this book, something that still comes up with my family and even some students who know that my first language is Spanish, and of course you can tell, is why are you writing in English? The simplest answer is that's how I was trained as a poet, in English, and I have no ear whatsoever for poetry in Spanish. I actually shared this experience during a presentation where, for a workshop in grad school, I swore, and it felt like the poem came to me in Spanish. However, when I presented it, the students who were practicing poets in Spanish totally crucified it. And I love that, actually. I really don't mind constructive and even a little bit cruel criticism, because for me, I also, because the grad program is bilingual, they ask you if you're able to translate. So when I translated it to English, it worked so much better. So it was this weird reverse translation thing where my Spanish is now filtered through English. It's a whole thing that being bilingual and rewiring those cables is a really interesting experience. And it's something that I really kept pressing while writing the book. So most of it is in Spanish, English. I wish it was in Spanish as well. But there was a need to reclaim certain words in Spanish. But there was also the equilibrium of, well, if I include too much Spanish, what will happen to the reader who is monolingual? Most of the time, I just want to let them feel a little bit uncomfortable, the way that our kids in the border sometimes feel. They're dropped into an English-speaking environment, and they have to survive and thrive in discomfort. But it's still something that I'm grappling with, because I know that the audience that I have to keep in mind is mostly English speaking. That's a big thing for me, because I've been all kinds of bilingual. Another thing about my identity, Elly was talking about not being self-aware. I was that kid, mostly because my identity was attached to what I could achieve. I was la niña del 10, the A girl, studying, sacrificing health, sleep since I was maybe 13. So I didn't, all I was my grades and my successes, my achievements. So when I had when I was 17, I didn't even take stock. Why? Because I had homework to do and I had to move on. So I wanted, as Elly was saying, for kids who are going through the same experience of just study, to take a step back and say, if you're thinking something that is not healthy, whatever you're dreaming about, it can come in dreams. It did for me. If you're thinking very often about not wanting to exist, then stop. And really, the book is a revision. I wanted Ana Maria to actually be able to take that step back and do what I couldn't do because I did not pay attention to my mental health. I was in medical school for 1 year, but had to drop out because me deschavete, which means I lost my marbles a little. But Ana Maria, actually, in my heart, I believe she went on and became the second William Carlos Williams poet and physician. So that's a little bit about me.
Amazing. And next we have.
Yeah.
E.
You know, it's interesting because each of the different, what everyone is saying, there's like little parts of that I just kind of want to just pull and say, yeah, that feels so true to me. I didn't realize Jonny had grown up I didn't see in your bio that you had grown up in East Texas. I just always associate with Corpus Christi. And East Texas is such a different kind of growing up, you know, especially in small communities, because I was adopted into a Caucasian family, and that's where their family was. And it was very racist. And that was like my first exploration of being a Mexican-American kid with a borrowed white last name and growing up in that kind of culture. But then I grew up in South Texas, you know, like you know, the way Margie talks about it, you know, close-ish to the border. And all of my friends were, you know, Chicano, Mexican-American. And those are the stories that I knew more than anything that I took to my heart, because I didn't have this sort of nuclear family that was Chicano or Mexican-American, but my friends were that. And that's why when I was in 7th grade and I was really struggling with my home family because they were very hard, but a history teacher gave me The Outsiders and said, I think you need to read this book. Now, I wasn't a boy, right? I wasn't a greaser. I wasn't a social. I wasn't growing up in the 50s. I mean, I look more like it now. But is that I read that book, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel alone. Like, I felt like I could belong somewhere because my friends were like having the greasers. You know, they were my family. And that's where that book, and when I realized how young the author was when she wrote it, when Essie Hinton dropped that, I thought, this idea I've had my whole life that I could write something, that I could say something, that I could be something. If this woman can do it, well, why couldn't I do it? It was that connection, you know, and in that moment of feeling less alone. Now, if I look back, do I say The Outsiders is a perfect book? No, of course not. But do I think of it as a door? And it was a door for me because of my personal struggles at home and finding connection in my community, right? Because I didn't have that in the home. And so when I write my books now, I think there are a lot of those elements that come from, you know, witnessing racism at such a young age and pushing against it and feeling like I didn't belong in the family that I was in and looking for family. And what does family mean? And I know those ripple out in all the different books, not just the Fat Angie series, but all the books, you know. And I think it's inevitable that we return to those stories, not just to kind of heal ourselves, but now more than ever. I mean, we keep talking about representation on the page, and that can look like a lot of things, right? That can look like culture. It can look like white passing with privilege, but you're Mexican American. It can look like disability. It can look like people with mental health issues. And I think those ideas of broadening the scope so that young people like me don't feel alone, right? When they get that copy of whether, you know, it's Elly's book or Jonny's book or Alessandra's book, like that they feel connected and celebrated. Like, to me, that is what this is for me. That's it. That's it. Like, that's it. That's what it comes to me. So, yeah.
And I love that you say about like The Outsiders, because I was in 3rd grade when I saw the movie, and I've always loved pretty boys on everything, you know. So every single one of those boys on the screen was the most beautiful person I'd ever seen, right? So yeah. So I was like, oh my God, what? And I read it because I'm like one of those weirdos. I read everything. So it said based on a book. So I was like, Daddy, I need this book. He took me to Walden Books, and I remember I still have my old my first Outsiders with that old cover with all of them on it.
Yep.
And I read that book 100 times, and then I read it. I mean, I read it in elementary, I read it in junior high, I read it in high school. When I taught 8th grade, I was like I read it with my 8th graders 7 times a day whenever we read it, because I taught 7 classes, I think it was. Like I have that book memorized. And you say it's not the perfect book, but I think it is the perfect book. I mean, I know the writing is like, oh my God, and you know what I mean?
It's not perfect, but it doesn't have to.
And because it was such a big part of our childhood, I guess is what it was. And it made me love books, and it made me love everything about books. So I and Essie Hinton, if I were to ever, she's the only author that I like love that I have never met yet?
I met her at NCPE. So I had just spoken on the main stage with like Jason Reynolds and Greg Neary and Sharon Draper, and we're up there. And then so there's like 6,000 educators or something we just talked to, and then I step off and they're like, and these educators pulled me into a line and said they put me to the front. There were over 500 people in line to meet her, and I got right to the front and I got to meet her, and I was literally 12 all over again because I was so cool holding that book for the first time. She's a human like the rest of us, but it was so cool.
Yes.
So for you, I met her for you. Just like I did it for you.
Oh my God, that's somebody I would love to just, and then I don't even know if I could meet her because I probably would act like a fool, so maybe I shouldn't. Because I love her so much. I remember that's one of my, and to this day, that book is one of my favorite because I feel that book is so universal. Like, even though it's about a bunch of white boys from Oklahoma, but it doesn't matter because the friendships that we form they become our family. And oh my God, that book, I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. So, okay, next question. Growing up, who were some of your favorite writers and why?
So, I mean, for me, I did love The Outsiders, but another author that I loved was Judy Blume. I mean, you were talking about The Outsiders and whether you didn't, see yourself in that exact frame of book, but it's, as all the books we write, I mean, for me, the books that have stayed with me are books, it's their heart that has stayed with me. It's not like necessarily like if I looked just like the characters, or it was the connection, the emotional connection that I felt with the story. And that, as you had said, that the character made me feel like I wasn't going through or experiencing something by myself. Like I had a person in that character. And so Judy Blume's books, I mean, I think they inspired my writing, but they also I'm the youngest of two older brothers. I don't know. I just felt like she got me. I felt like whatever I was going through was on the pages of those books and I could connect. And, when I was younger, little, like, I loved Eloise and Ramona the Brave. I was, as being the youngest of two older brothers, I like to think that I could do anything, that there was no boy who could do anything better than I could do it. And I was always pretty feisty. So I saw myself on those pages and was really happy that they were like strong, even if they were pesky, strong girls being represented. So I think those were books that I loved, and Judy Blume was an author that had just kind of touched my heart, all of her books, and made me feel like I wasn't alone. I mean, that's really I think that's what this identity conversation is all about, right? So that the readers who are feeling the things that we have felt, that we have seen, that we have gone through alone or have been navigating, that these characters we write are like friends. They can help people and help other kids like us.
And they are friends. You're right. And I tell this story all the time because Judy Blume, I did get to meet. She's one of my favorites too growing up. And I met her at a library conference and I did cry. That's why I know if I meet Esty Hinton, I'll die. Because I cried and like, you guys loved you since just dumb things that you say to people. It's like, why? Like, if I could go back. But I remember meeting her and thinking like, I remember reading Judy Blume books also growing up. They were some of the most beautiful books that you could read as a young girl, I guess it was at the time, where you felt like somebody did get you. So yes.
And at that time, I mean, I'm well into my 50s. So like at the time I was growing up, those weren't conversations that we're having the way I think that the way those conversations are happening more now, like the things we were experiencing as kids growing up, whether it was sexuality or whatever, like that was not really being discussed. It wasn't really dinner table discussion I think it's more now, at least, our dinner table. So yeah, I loved her.
Thank you. Okay, Jonny.
So I think that while I've largely removed her existence from my life, I think it's important to point out that as a person who grew up like when I grew up, that a certain writer of a certain wizard school was very influential in my life. And like, do I appreciate that and what she was there for when I was 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15? Yes, absolutely. So I have to give her that acknowledgement while also just never mentioning her name. But I think as even a contemporary writer, like I have to shout out The Outsiders. Like I think that was really the first book, and as a middle schooler, that really just like, this is great. Like whatever this is, I'll have like 4 more of them just wherever they are. Um, and then like into high school, I was really into like Catcher in the Rye, as much as like that's a book that you either love or you hate. I fell into that love category so hard for it. Like I think it's spectacular in its contemporary writing, and just like as like a seminal YA book of the time. I really loved Sandra Cisneros growing up. Whenever I think of the perfect book, I think of Rodolfo Anaya's Bless Me Ultima, and just like how incredibly Mexican it is, but also just like identity and him like battling what he wants to be in his life, even like as a little kid, and just how relatable that was. I'm trying to make your family happy, but like what is making you happy? And it's just like, wow, like the relevance is just so clear right now to me. But yeah, and then even as a really, really small kid, I can't remember who wrote it, but I was obsessed with Hank the Cowdog, like in elementary school. I read like all 50, however many of them were out at the time. Every time I read them, I thought of like my grandparents' dog out in like Nursery, Texas on their dirt road. Like I was like, I'm literally living the Hank the Cowdog life. Like it's so great. And so, yeah, I think just a mixture of like all of those books that kind of just like made me feel at home, but also just like resonated in these contemporary lives that I could just like live in for a minute, were really things that I loved reading.
Rodolfo Anaya's book, Bless Me Ultima, is a beautiful book. It was last summer. It was during pandemic, I think it was. I remember sitting on my couch and then hearing that he passed away. I sat there and cried. Like if I knew the man personally, like if he was my grandpa or something, I cried and then my husband came out. He's like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "Rodolfo Anaya died." And he was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, babe." Like he didn't know what to do because it hurt me so much because that's a beautiful, beautiful book. So thank you for mentioning that one. Okay, next, Alessandra.
So I come from a different educational system. So there was reading, and I still think they have beautiful textbooks that the government provides. They're beautiful. So we would read whatever was assigned. So Juana Inés de la Cruz is someone that I remember because of the very famous poem. But I would also have to say that my awakening in terms of literature was through Harry Potter. And I think that character has grown so big that we don't have to mention the author anymore, which is really nice because it was, I don't know how you felt, Jonny, but I was lost in this world. And actually one of my charms here that I keep is this, right? So I'm still waiting for my owl to make it, but I think that I'm too old. I am a muggle, but I think I might have like a hybrid. I don't know. Anyways, that is a book that really awakened my love for reading because I was always into textbooks and learning facts and regurgitating. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Yes. Parroting. And I love science. I think it's still my first love. So I came into this tradition of reading and loving literature a little bit later in life. And I just recently read The Outsiders. I was, 34, 35 this year, because I'm trying to work on a second story that is focused on a boy. So I don't know, like when I started writing 30, I was not aware of the literary canon, and I know that's really bad. I just went for it and then learned little by little throughout the revision and editing process. But I said, for this second project, I'm going to prepare better. So The Outsiders really did a number on me because I still feel the language is working very well, the characters. Another one that I had to read, according to my really quick research, is The Chocolate War by Robert, is it Cormier? I don't know how you pronounce it. I love that book. I really loved the way that he created a really cruel and evil character, like one of the priests slash teachers, but made it very subtle. So that's a book that I still feel very attached to as I continue writing. Who else? I would have to mention too that my mom was the first writer that really impacted my life, because to this day, she writes the most beautiful notes. And that's where I got this cursi gene, the corny gene. And I couldn't believe how much you could be affected by a written note. And besides that beautiful handwriting, she would also draw little dolls on it. And that's where I got the practice of, what if I could make someone feel something with just writing? And of course, I have a running joke in the family is that both my dad and mom have so many letters from me asking for forgiveness, and saying like, I should be a better daughter, and I know that the world will be this and that. It's just pure hyperbole y cursilería, and that's the person that I've been for a long time. But I would say my mom was the first writer that I saw that I understood the power of writing.
That's beautiful. That's so beautiful, because I feel the same way about my dad. Like my dad was my dad's handwriting was super, like, my dad was this big, grand, he was bigger than life man, and his handwriting was bigger than everything about him. So I remember looking at his handwriting and just thinking like how beautiful it was. I have so many saved letters and just little notes that he would write, because I just thought his handwriting was so beautiful. And every once in a while, because now how we email everybody, I still like to send letters to like people that I love, like my best friends and my friends, like a handwritten letter, like, hi, how are you? Just on a pretty little card, because we don't get that anymore. And you're right. To me, those are very, very special. That was a beautiful story. Okay, next.
So I really, I grew up I always say this every time, it's so true. I grew up in a book desert. We didn't have access to a lot of books. And it was one of the poorest communities in Texas. And a lot of our books were very dated, and there were books I couldn't relate to. Like, there just weren't the stories that they weren't about queerness. They weren't about being Mexican American. And if they were about the Alamo. And so I was like, I can't relate to that. Like, I can only watch the Alamo every year in school for so long. I don't want to hashtag love always Alamo. But so, the other book that was sort of given to me was a book of poems by E.E. Cummings when I was in high school. And it was an old, battered book. It was like a first edition. So like, snap, it was wrong that I stole it and still have it. But I think my teacher understands. But that book was the first time that I could see on the page that you could move across it freely. There was a freedom. It was like a canvas. You could paint with letters and move to the right, to the left, to the center, to the back. And that it could be moody and shallow and sexy and naughty and angry. And it could have all these layers. And there were just these moments of words. And I thought, I want to do that. That's exciting. And that was sort of the beginnings of a lot of really bad poetry, because I had tried to be like Cummings and I wasn't ready. But that was, I didn't, unlike my fellow authors, I didn't actually read a lot of books for young people when I was that age, because they just weren't there for me, and they weren't books that I could relate to. I was reading about tornado formation. Like, it just was not the same thing. So, there's the metaphor of my home. But now, as I got older, of course, and I got into college, and I was like, oh, who's Louise Eldridge? Who's Sandra Cisneros? Bell Hooks? It's like, I was reading Raymond Carver's short fiction because he was the master of compression, or John Updike. And yeah, they're white dudes, but like they were white dudes who had some really interesting ideas about how to compress a story. And what I could learn from that was structure and format. And so, I look back and I think about that and I go, okay, those were, like reading Cisneros for the first time, and there was English and Spanish together, and not ever seeing that before until that moment. You know what I mean? And feeling and having this moment after reading it where this is a true story and it'll be really fast, is there was a white student who stood up and she was very indignant. She was angry because she says, I'm white, I don't speak Spanish. They should have a footnote of what it means. I shouldn't have to do the work. And we're in college, like we do the work, right? And so now the room was full of Mexican American, Chicano, Latinx students, right? And we were, but there were white folks too, and black kids and everything, but I'm just saying we were all there, and I stood up. I don't know why, because I felt stupid right away, right? But I stood up and I said, I called her out and I said she was wrong. And the teacher told me to sit down. She said I was wrong. The teacher was white. And of course I look white, right? And I always remember that moment that I stood up for Cisneros. You know what I mean? Because in that moment, she was wrong to say that what we say and how we say is wrong. How many parents were slapped when they tried to speak Spanish in class, right? How many other kids went through that? My friends went through that. And this woman stood up and said she didn't need to do the work. And I'm like, that's what we're doing today. When we write books, we are doing the work and we're still doing it. So I've always carried that in my heart because the teacher kept me after class and she said to me, everybody gets to have an opinion. And I was like, you didn't even comment. Right. You didn't even offer any kind of comment, and I always remember that. And so now when I'm writing and people like the book, dislike the book, this and that, at least they're having a conversation. Because when we're in conversation, we're an opportunity. When that woman stood up, there was no conversation. You know what I mean? And so I think about those books and I look back and I go, yeah, I didn't grow up reading the way all of you probably did. But man, when I got to college, you couldn't stop me. I was on fire, So anyway.
Yeah, I think, when you talk about this, you're right. I mean, that's why we all write these books, is that to give voice to the unseen, to the voiceless, to let every single kid out there know that their voice matters, that we want to hear what they have to say. Agree, disagree, doesn't matter. Always kindness, always respect.
There you go.
Yeah. We have a comment here from one of our viewers. Let me see. It says show. Elly says, I can relate to Alessandra. My dad is not published, but he writes beautiful poems and he's so inspiring to me. Thank you for sharing your story. That was nice. Okay, so the next question, we just have a little bit more time. Let's talk about food. What is your favorite food, and explain with grand details? Okay, go Elly.
Okay, so Jonny, you had mentioned this earlier. Food is in every one of my books. It is a huge part of I'm a Jewish mama. Like it is cooking, baking for family. I feel like food just brings people together. Mm-hmm. Like in my life, in my experiences, whether it's, cookies, baking, or meatballs, it doesn't matter. There's just something about that shared experience. And it is in every one of my books. So one of my favorite things to make now is actually in Dear Student, and there's a recipe on the back. I made their Fearless Breads, famous whoopie pies. And because I'm gluten and dairy free, there are allergy free recipes in the back also. But I love baking. I love making meatballs, chicken parm. Those are also things that I like making for my family. But I think anytime there's something happen, anytime there's a waft of like something delicious smelling coming from the kitchen, people come to that space and gather and feel connected. And so for me, and I explored this a lot in Smart Cookie, that idea of like sometimes family is so much bigger than the people that you share a name or childhood with. It's like that whole herd of people who've got your back. And those people I find often, are in your kitchen and you're sharing that moment with them. So food is a huge part of, I think it's a huge part of my heart and is always in my books. And so yeah, whoopie pies and meatballs. Maybe not together, but
Jonny?
I had to think so hard about this question, like trying to figure out which one specifically I wanted to just highlight. I think ultimately, like, I have to say breakfast tacos. I mean, even that's kind of broad, but I mean, like, living in San Antonio, like, you're gonna get like the barbacoa and the corn tortillas, and it's just gonna be like everything you ever asked for. Like, it can be, you can like literally any. So, oh my god, and like,
Jonny, I'm getting really hungry.
I think my favorite that I like to even make on my own is like oh my gosh, what was a la mexicana with like just the eggs and like jalapeno and onion and rotel all in there, and then I like to add like potato in there too, and just like a violent amount of salsa verde, like just like a breakfast taco with just copious amounts of salsa verde. I'm that's all I need in life, really.
Alessandra?
So I have to mention that my parents have been restaurant owners since I was maybe 6, 10. So they had a taqueria, different taquerias in Ciudad Juárez, and then they crossed the puddle known as El Rio Bravo, and they had a restaurant. So it's not only a taqueria in El Paso for 20-something years, and thankfully it survived the pandemic. So a big thing, and I don't know if you feel it, Margarita, but in the border, I feel like I become extra snobbish.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know that 30 minutes away, I can get real burritos, real barbacoa, and I'm not gonna overpay. My husband is so much more kind, and he's Mexican American. I guess I'm a little bit more Mexican than American at this point. I don't know, but it really is a big theme around us. It's like, let's just buy tacos, but where and how much? Because I'd rather just stand in line. Anyways, that said, I would say that anything my mom cooks, I would love. Jonny, if you're ever in El Paso, and all of you, she's a master salsa maker. I'm still wanting to bottle that thing up so they can retire and move to I don't know where. But that said, one of my favorite dishes by her, and I don't know if you'll see the picture, she made this for my sister's birthday, and those are chiles en nogada.
Ooh.
So, and it's laborious, and it's a very special dish in Mexican culture. And my mom just, wakes up and says, I'm going to get all of this after cooking all week, waking up at 5:30. She makes us feel special with dishes like this. So right now, currently, my number one is chiles en nogada by my beautiful mamita, Amanda.
Wow. I don't follow all that up. Elly's talking about people coming in the kitchen. When I cook, they're leaving the kitchen and not running for the door. So
we've been in the kitchen together.
Yeah, but I wasn't cooking for you. You were cooking. And cooking is not my thing, but I can buy food and I'm hella good at toast. So there's I can make a mean avocado toast in a pinch. But no, I'm with Jonny. I mean, breakfast tacos. I mean, they speak to my soul. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like milanesa. I like I can't do menudo, but I do like a caldo every now and then. But the breakfast tacos, they sing to my heart, and but Alessandra's right. There's a difference between eating on this side and the other side. It's the food, the flavors, the spices, there's burritos and then there's deep fried burritos. It's just all about how you look at it. But food, of course, is in every book. And I think it was, it might've been Linda Sue Park who said once that she didn't understand books where people didn't eat. It's like being on the Brady Bunch. They were in the bathroom, but they didn't have a toilet. Like what? How can you not have a toilet? Look at how many people are in the Brady Bunch. So you have to them eventually. They're not all going to the gas station. So it doesn't make sense to me that if you create some work of art, or that you don't have food in it, because food is, Elly says how food brings us together, and I immediately thought, well, also food is how we can be separated, how we can be torn apart too. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting how you can use that as a device in your writing, like how a scene can play out differently depending on what is served, how it's served, when it's served, and so. But if I could put breakfast tacos and some variation in everything I write, oh my God, I'm telling you, every day, all day, I would do it.
All of our next books are having breakfast tacos in them, right?
I mean,
Jonny, like the California ones, they put rice in them, right? And then
and I honestly did not grow up with burritos, and so even as a concept, I'm like, I know they exist, but it's I don't have to be a part of that life, honestly.
That's another world. Yeah. So it all depends on where you are, though, the kind that you'll have. Anyway.
And it's funny that Alessandra said to be a snob, because I am like, it's actually yes, we're snob. There's on the other side, there's here on the border, and then when you pass where I live, an hour up, we have this place where I go to down 281 Falfurias. Past Falfurias, the food is different, and you're like, this is not Mexican. And you pass Fal, you get other places that's like, no, like this isn't Mexican food. Like, what is this? You call this Mexican? Like, that's us everywhere we go. This is not Mexican food. Like, we think we're the the experts in all food Mexican because we're the real South. Yeah. But yeah, that's funny. But it was so great having you guys here today. I've taken up 50 minutes of your morning, and I'm so grateful. And it was such a great conversation. And I'm so happy that I finally got to meet Elly and Alessandra and Jonny. And I go way back. We're besties for the resties. And I'm so excited that you guys were here. So if you guys have anything else to say, anything new that you guys want to just shout out real quick before we end? Or
I do.
I just want to say thank you to you and to E for inviting me in. It was amazing meeting all of you and seeing E again. My only shout out, Dear Student, comes out in February, right after Valentine's Day. So keep the love alive. You can pre-order it. It comes out in audio, and those whoopie pie recipes are in the back. So I'm excited for you guys to meet Autumn. She's a big part of my heart. So, and I'm excited to hopefully we'll reconnect again. Yes. So thank you for having us this morning.
In real life, in person, so we can hug.
Yes, exactly.
You can get my book, 300 Miles from the Sun. Most places, some places where books are, you can get it at the Nowhere Bookshop in San Antonio, Texas, online as well. We do offer signed and personalized copies through the Nowhere Bookshop if you would prefer that. And my next book, Andre and Something We're Here, comes out in 2023. And speaking of food, it does mainly take place in a taqueria. And it follows a non-binary muralist taking a gap year from college who falls for the newest waiter at their family's taqueria. And it takes place in San Antonio, and I'm just super excited about that one. But while we wait for it, you can read this.
So is the launch party going to be at a taqueria?
I'm really hoping it could be at Nowhere, and we can get a taco truck outside.
All right.
In San Antonio?
It's San Antonio? Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll be there.
Okay, I'll send you
right down the road.
Very pretty.
Well, this is 30 Talks Real Love, sold locally in Literarity, also Lee and Low Books. And since EE expressed it so well, I just wanted to leave today with a sentence that I'm sure it's not perfect, but English-Spanish bilingualism is beautiful. So let's celebrate it in any way, shape, or form that it comes in.
And last but not least, me, came out in November, Farangi, also at Nowhere Books, if you would like it personalized and signed. And you can buy it anywhere else where books are sold. Now I feel like I'm selling something out of my car. And last but not least, of course, I am crossing over. This is the pre-book where I get to approve it. My first picture book is releasing. I am so stoked. It's Lupe Lopez, Rockstar Rules. I'm not going to lie. It has a lot to do with my problems with authority as a child. So this is based quite a bit on my own childhood. So this will be coming out in the spring, and it's through Candlewick Press. And I co-wrote it with Pat Zietlow Miller, and it's illustrated by Joe Cepeda. So
Amazing.
obviously the real book will have less crinkles. So there you go. I'm really stoked. I love picture books with my whole heart. Margie, when you said that, I was like, I literally checked out 53 from the library and they let me go over the 50 limit so that I could just sit and pour over them. So
Picture books. I think picture books are the purest form of love. They are just the most, I love them. I can sit, I know I'm 45 years old and I can have picture books. I think I have more picture books than regular books. And me and my mother love, and I love picture books because of my mom. My favorite one is Where the Wild Things Are. That was like the first one that I remember made a big impact on me as a child because that's what my mom would read to me over and over. And picture books. Okay, that's a whole other conversation. I could talk another hour about picture books.
I'm sad.
Thank
I'm
you guys
sad
so
for the
much.
love.
And I'm so excited that oh yes, and I'm gonna tell Nayeli again. She said that she's an elementary librarian, so she's excited to get that book for you from you. Okay. Well, thank you guys, and I'll see you. Hopefully we'll see each other at TLA. Is anybody gonna go to TLA?
I think so.
Yay! Okay, then I hope to see you guys there. I'll try to meet up. Okay, I'll text everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.